We live in interesting times for the headlines. Polling stations are due to open across Hong Kong on Sunday morning as the semi-autonomous city of 7.5 million votes for district councillors. A Philippine Airlines flight makes an emergency landing in LA after spitting fire from its engine. The first ever global trends for adolescent insufficient physical activity show that urgent action is needed to increase physical activity levels in girls and boys aged 11 to 17 years. Our EBC correspondent takes us to the Chaplin Museum in Switzerland. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, and now to the news. Polling stations are due to open across Hong Kong on Sunday morning as the semi-autonomous city of 7.5 million votes for district councillors in a ballot seen as a gauge at the popularity of Chief Executive Carrie Lam and the pro-Beijing government. It will be the first governmental poll since the city's social unrest began in June. The poll is to choose 452 councillors across 18 districts and is the closest voters in Hong Kong can get to direct representation. By contrast, members of the city's legislature are elected by a combination of popular vote and industry groups stacked with Beijing loyalists, while the city's chief executive is chosen by a similarly pro-establishment committee. With the ongoing anti-government protest that has dragged on for more than 5 months, political considerations may come across more important than local agendas when voters cast their ballot on November 24. The political unrest of recent months has overshadowed what would normally be a calm campaign. A pro-democracy candidate had his ear bitten off, while 17 other candidates of all stripes, some seeking re-election, have been arrested over protest-related activities. Meanwhile, election authorities banned democracy activist Joshua Wong from running in the district poll over his political views, espousing self-determination for the Chinese-ruled city. Meanwhile, the South China Morning Post said all polling stations will be guarded by armed officers in riot gear for the first time in the history of local polls. The police force will be on maximum reserve mode to thwart any disruptions or violence, according to police. A senior police source also said that to enable such tight security, almost all officers in the 31,000-strong force, regardless of which division they are attached to, have to report for duty on Election Day, with 3,000 riot control officers and crime investigators on standby. Meanwhile, a dwindling core of die-hard protesters remained holed up inside the now trashed Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Take a look. Exhausted protesters draped in gold and silver medical blankets periodically trickled from the now quiet campus of Hong Kong Polytechnic University, or PolyU, which days earlier saw fiery clashes between police and protesters armed with bows, arrows, and Molotov cocktails. Now, since then, hundreds have fled out of fear or deteriorating living conditions, most of them quickly arrested by police and likely to face rioting charges. But dozens remained holed up in buildings or were seen walking in the campus in small groups, masked and dressed in the movement's signature black or carrying bows and arrows. Hong Kong's nearly 6 months of turmoil began with the now-shelved bill to allow extraditions to China, which revived fears that Beijing was slicing into the city's freedom. The troubles have already tipped Hong Kong's economy into recession, and the threat of a change in trade status brought fresh gloom to the city. And the sun rises on Hong Kong Polytechnic University, which has been surrounded for nearly a week by police, with a few diehard protesters holed up somewhere inside. Now lying seemingly almost empty, the campus was at the epicenter last weekend of some of the most intense confrontations in the city's near 6-month crisis. Again, let's take a look. Beijing's ambassador to Britain, Liu Xiaoming, said China will not simply sit back and watch if months of protests in Hong Kong develop into an uncontrollable situation. Let's listen in.
Violent perpetrators must be brought to justice. This is the only way to safeguard the interests of the public and secure a better future for Hong Kong and cement the foundation of one country, two systems. We urge these forces to immediately stop any form of interference in Hong Kong affairs, China's internal affairs, and immediately stop condoning violent offenses. Otherwise, they will lift the stone only to drop it on their own feet. So I think now the Hong Kong government is trying very hard to put the situation under control. But if the situation becomes uncontrollable, the central government certainly would not sit on our hands and watch. We have enough resolution and power to end the unrest.
The comments from China's top diplomat in London came after a brief and rare deployment of Chinese troops in Hong Kong over the weekend to clean up the streets. The People's Liberation Army has a barracks in an upper-class district of Hong Kong. And Liu Xiaoming also warned against external interference in internal Chinese affairs, singling out Britain and the United States and accusing them of condoning violence by protesters. Britain, the former colonial power in Hong Kong, said it was seriously concerned about the latest outbreak of violence.
I think when the British government criticized the Hong Kong police, criticized the Hong Kong government in handling the situation, they are interfering into China's internal affairs. And they look like they are balanced, but as a matter of fact, they are taking sides.
The envoy said the illegal violent activities of protesters had pushed Hong Kong into an extremely dangerous situation. The unrest had eroded China's one country, two systems approach to governing Hong Kong, although he said Beijing remained committed to the policy. He accused demonstrators of trying to destabilize and paralyze Hong Kong to seize power in a push for independence. Meanwhile, take a look at these aerial views of Hong Kong Polytechnic University, the scene of violent clashes between protesters and police earlier in the week. The near-empty, soundless labyrinth of buildings is a world away from the cacophony of a brash, bustling city of 7.5 million people. Take a look. Going now to the U.S. and the latest on the impeachment hearing, a former top White House Russia expert testified that Republicans defending President Donald Trump in impeachment hearings had fallen for a Russian conspiracy theory about Ukraine. Former National Security Council official Fiona Hill told the fifth day of House Intelligence Committee impeachment hearings that the theory that some Republicans and President Trump embrace that Ukraine and not Russia meddled in the 2016 elections is a fiction designed by Moscow to wreak havoc in the U.S. politics. Let's listen in.
Based on questions and statements I've heard, some of you on this committee appear to believe that Russia and its security services did not conduct a campaign against our country, and that perhaps, somehow, for some reason, Ukraine did. This is a fictional narrative that has been perpetrated and propagated by the Russian security services themselves. The Russian government's goal is to weaken our country, to diminish America's global role, and to neutralize a perceived U.S. threat to Russian interests.
Democrats have accused President Trump of abusing his power to pressure Ukraine to open investigations that would help his domestic political standing by targeting his Democratic rivals. Dr. Hill told the panel that the Ukraine story is part of a Russian effort to weaken, quote, our country.
Right now, Russia's security services and their proxies have geared up to repeat their interference in the 2020 election. We are running out of time to stop them. In the course of this investigation, I would ask that you please not promote politically driven falsehoods that so clearly advance Russian interests. These fictions are harmful even if they are deployed for purely domestic political purposes.
President Trump, a number of witnesses in the impeachment inquiry have said, believe that it was Ukraine and not Russia who meddled in the 2016 presidential election. They also have claimed that President Trump's Democratic opponents hid a secret computer server controlled by the cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike in Ukraine that would prove the first theory. No evidence has emerged to support either claim, but President Trump and his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, pressured Ukraine from early this year to open an investigation into the issue. Now, the Democratic chair of the House impeachment panel alleged that President Trump, by withholding military aid from Ukraine to demand dirt on a potential 2020 election rival, went beyond anything done by disgraced predecessor Richard Nixon. Nixon resigned in 1974, 2 years after the burglary of Democratic offices in the Watergate complex in Washington. Now, Mr. Adam Schiff's comments came at the end of 5 days of public hearings in the impeachment inquiry, which saw several witnesses testify that military aid to Ukraine was made contingent on President Trump's demand that Ukraine's President Zelensky announce an investigation of the Bidens. Take a look.
What we've seen here is far more serious than a third-rate burglary of the Democratic headquarters. What we're talking about here is the withholding of recognition in that White House meeting, the withholding of military aid to an ally at war. That is beyond anything Nixon did. The difference between then and now is not the difference between Nixon and Trump. It's the difference between that Congress and this one.
I'm going to start in June of 2016, when Donald Trump was just a candidate. On behalf of the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS hires Christopher Steele to write the Steele dossiers, a collection of false allegations attributed to Russian sources claiming that Donald Trump is a Russian agent. Democrats on this committee falsely declare on national TV that they have more than circumstantial evidence that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. July 12th, an article of impeachment is filed against President Trump in the House of Representatives. November 15th, Democrats file additional articles of impeachment against President Trump. July 25th, a new anti-Trump operation begins as someone listens to the president's phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky and leaks the contents to the so-called whistleblower. What you've seen in this room over the past 2 weeks is a show trial. Planned result of 3 years of political operations and dirty tricks. Campaigns waged against this president. And like any good show trial, the verdict was decided before the trial ever began. Will there be even more secret depositions accompanied by the usual flood of Democratic leaks? Will we have more public hearings with Democrat witnesses but not ours?
President Trump is threatened with impeachment by the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives for pushing President Zelensky in a July 25 phone call to investigate Democrat Joe Biden and his son Hunter, who served on the board of a Ukrainian gas company.
The difference between Nixon
Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the hearing showed that President Trump used his office for personal gain. She also said that lawmakers had no choice but to act after they observed what she called a violation of the Constitution by the president.
And when we see a violation of the Constitution, we had no choice but to act. And the evidence is clear that the president has used his office for his own personal gain, and in doing so undermined the national security of the United States by withholding military assistance to the Ukraine to the benefit of the Russians. I believe that the truth will set us free. The president has said to me, the call was perfect. I said to him, the call was perfectly wrong.
Asked if she has heard enough evidence from witnesses so far to determine whether the House will pursue articles of impeachment against the president, Pelosi said, "We haven't made any decisions yet. Here's more."
Well, see, we aren't finished yet. The day is not over, and you never know what testimony of one person may lead to the need for testimony of another, as we saw in this committee. So, no, we haven't made any decision. And as I said to the president, if you have any information that is exculpatory, please bring it forward, because it seems that the facts are uncontested as to what happened. Now, if you have, no, we're not going to wait till the courts decide. That might be information that's available to the Senate in terms of how far we go and when we go. But we can't wait for that, because again, it's a technique. It's obstruction of justice, obstruction of Congress. So we cannot let.
Now, the Speaker added that any decision to move forward will be made by the relevant House committees. While the Intelligence Committee has conducted the public impeachment hearings, the Judiciary Committee would be the committee to draft and vote on articles of impeachment before they go to the House floor for a vote. In other news, he's a survivor, but tonight Israel's embattled Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was indicted on a range of corruption charges, potentially spelling an end to his decades-long political career. After long deliberations, Attorney General, one of Netanyahu's closest advisors, indicted the Prime Minister in charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust.
היום הזה הוא יום קשה ועצוב. היום הודעתי לבאי כוחו של ראש הממשלה, מר בנימין נתניהו, על החלטתי להעמידו לדין בכתב אישום הכולל 3 אישומים. יום שבו היועץ המשפטי לממשלה מחליט על הגשת כתב אישום נגד ראש ממשלה מכהן בגין עבירות חמורות של שחיתות שלטונית, הוא יום קשה ועצוב מבחינת הציבור בישראל ומבחינתי באופן אישי.
A defiant Benjamin Netanyahu rejected all allegations of graft, and he vowed to stay on as leader in Israel despite being indicted on a series of corruption charges. He also called it a political coup and a witch hunt.
כי הערב אנחנו עדים לניסיון של הפיכה שלטונית נגד ראש ממשלה בעלילות שווא ובתהליך חקירות מזוהם ומגמתי.
Netanyahu is accused of doling out favors to media tycoons in exchange for flattering news coverage and hundreds of thousands of dollars in gifts. Netanyahu, who strongly denies all the charges, becomes the first Israeli prime minister to be indicted while in office. Right-winger Netanyahu, who is nicknamed Mr. Security and King Bibi, and has been in power since 2009, is Israel's longest-serving prime minister and dominates the country's political scene. The news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
On November 23, we are opening our doors to you for the ultimate EBC experience. Enjoy performances from your favorite OPM artists and meet our talented reporters, hosts, and DJs too. Experience hosting, reporting, camera handling, and more in our interactive booths. Visit exhibits of various products, innovative business solutions, and even job openings featured in our trade fair. For small and medium enterprises, learn tips and tricks at the Business Forum on entrepreneurship and technology. Also avail of fast and hassle-free services from our government agency partners such as the PSA, SSS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth, and more. Admission is free, so bring the whole family, learn, dine, and experience the EBC Open House and Trade Fair. EBC Open House and Trade Fair is sponsored by LBC Express Incorporated, Becky's Ice Dream, Royal Care Marketing Services, Ayala Land International Sales Incorporated, Nature Spring, Just Payroll, Andox Lechon Manok, Tempra by Taisho Pharmaceuticals Philippines Incorporated, Go Hotels, Manila Airport Road, North EDSA, Cubao Ermita, and Timog, Micaela, bags, shoes, wallet, and umbrella. Style meets versatility. Loven Prime International, leading people to a magnificent life. And PLDT Enterprise.
Tungkulin ng MTRCB ang mag-provide na appropriate ratings sa lahat ng TV shows. Para ugaliin ng pamilya ang responsableng panonood. Teamwork tayo, parents!
Rated G, good for all.
U.S. of provocative conduct after 2 U.S. warships sailed near islands claimed by Beijing this week, adding to the tensions between the global powers.
中国南部战区依法对美国有关舰船全程进行跟踪监视、查证识别，并予以警告驱离。美方的行为严重损害中国主权和安全利益，破坏南海和平稳定，我们对此表示坚决反对。中方已经就此向美方提出严正交涉，表达强烈抗议。
The U.S. Navy regularly conducts freedom of navigation operations in the disputed South China Sea, where China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan have competing claims. The U.S. Navy said the USS Gabriel Giffords littoral combat ship sailed near the Mischief Reef in the Spratly Islands on Wednesday, and the USS Wayne E. Meyer guided missile destroyer passed the Paracel Islands on Thursday. Now, China dispatched military vessels to identify and monitor the U.S. ships and then warned them to leave The People's Liberation Army Southern Theater Command said in a statement on Friday. Washington and Beijing are locked in a bruising trade war and have tussled over diplomatic issues, including a bill passed by the U.S. Congress this week in support of pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. China has laid claim to nearly all of the South China Sea and has built numerous military outposts on the small islands and atolls of the region, angering other claimants. In recent months, the U.S. military has stepped up its freedom of navigation operations, or FONAPs, in the region, irking Beijing but not sparking any direct confrontation thus far. In other news, detectives investigating the deaths of 39 Vietnamese nationals whose bodies were found in a refrigerated lorry in southeast England on Friday said they had made another arrest. Essex police said a 23-year-old man from Northern Ireland had been held on suspicion of conspiracy to traffic people and conspiracy to assist unlawful immigration. He was detained in the early hours of Friday at the M40 motorway, according to the force in a statement. The bodies of 8 women and 31 men were found in a trailer on an industrial estate east of London on October 23. The lorry had earlier arrived on a cargo ferry from the Belgian port of Zeebrugge. Lorry driver Mo Robinson, 25, has appeared in court charged with 39 counts of manslaughter, conspiracy to traffic people, conspiracies to assist unlawful immigration, and money laundering. He's scheduled to appear at an administrative hearing at a London court next week. Another man from Northern Ireland, Eamon Harrison, 22, is facing extradition proceedings for the same charges and appeared in court in Dublin on Thursday. The case was adjourned until December 12. In other news, hundreds of thousands of Colombians took to the streets of the capital, Bogota, on Thursday amid a general strike to protest the policies of President Ivan Duque's right-wing government. Take a look. Now, there were reports of clashes and arrests as trade unions, students, opposition parties, and the South American countries' indigenous organizations challenged the full gamut of President Duque's economic, social, and security policies. At night, a thunderous chorus of pot banging, unusual in Colombia, took place in the cities of Cali and Medellin and lasted for hours in Bogota. Later in the day, President Duque announced that he had heard the protesters' demand but did not respond to their request for direct dialogue. President Duque has reportedly mobilized hundreds of soldiers to reinforce the security in the country's biggest cities, in addition to closing all border crossings to Ecuador, Venezuela, Brazil, and Peru. And before we go on a break, bathers from 101 different countries squeeze into a sauna in Helsinki, Finland, in a successful attempt to reclaim the world record from China. Take a look.
I have to see evidence of their passport or their national identity card current to show what their nationality is. Also, they have to all be in the sauna at the same time for a minimum of 5 minutes at a minimum temperature of 60 degrees Celsius. This is the record for the most nationalities in a sauna, currently held by China, and they achieved 99 in 2013. Today, I have counted and officially verified here in Helsinki a total of 101. You have a
You're watching Eagle News. We'll be back with the business news.
Hi guys, I'm Marie Francisco here at the Shoe Museum in Marikina in the Philippines, reminding you to watch Digital News every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. And I am 1 for 25.
Malacanang was thankful that the crew and passengers of local flag carrier Philippine Airlines Boeing 777 plane are safe. This following an emergency landing at the Los Angeles International Airport. Take a look. The Federal Aviation Administration said soon after Philippine Airlines departed from Los Angeles International Airport, pilots reported a possible engine failure and landed without incident. PAL in a statement confirmed that flight PR-113, departing from LA to Manila, experienced a technical glitch shortly after takeoff. It said all 342 passengers and 18 crew members are safe and they were able to disembark from the airplane using regular air stairs. They also said that operation teams assisted the passengers and will provide medical support as needed, although there are no reports of injuries. PAL also affirmed that safety is their top priority and that Philippine Airlines is now fully cooperating with the concerned airport and aviation authorities. Take a look.
Nagka-depresya yata yung second engine. But that happens naman eh. That happens in the airlines industry. May mga nangyayari na mga... What is important to me is, walang nangyayari. Safe yung mga pasahero.
President Xi Jinping said that China wants to reach an initial trade deal with the United States, but is not afraid to fight back when necessary. The world's two biggest economies have been locked in a bruising trade conflict for more than a year, hitting each other with volleys of tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods. As we always said, we don't want to start a trade war, but we are not afraid, President Xi told former U.S. officials and other foreign dignitaries at a meeting at Beijing's Great Hall of the People. He said, when necessary, we will fight back, but we have been working actively to try not to have a war or not to have a trade war. He told the group, which included former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, former U.S. Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson, and former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd. Top trade negotiators spoke on the phone on Saturday in what the Chinese Commerce Ministry described as constructive discussions on a preliminary deal. China has insisted on a rollback of existing tariffs, which President Trump said he has not agreed to.
So, I can tell you this, China would much rather make a trade deal than I would.
Then why haven't they?
Because I haven't wanted to do it yet.
And why haven't you wanted to?
Because I don't think they're stepping up to the level that I want.
I spoke earlier today with Mr. Hogan. He said another round of tariffs would be bad for business. It would be bad for the United States.
I know, but you know, here's what I say. Here's what I say. What do you know? I put in tariffs. Everyone said, oh, gee, you're taking in billions, hundreds of billions of dollars we will be taking in. And everybody said, oh, that's going to be bad for the economy. Well, as you just heard from Tim Cook, we have the strongest economy by far in the world, and we're taking in billions and billions of dollars. So we'll see what happens. We are dealing with China. I have a great relationship with President Xi. They're a great country, but we're a greater country than China. If I didn't win, right now China would be a bigger economy than the United States. But because I won, we picked up, reported on your network, $11 trillion in worth in value. And China's lost probably $25 trillion. We are much bigger than China right now, and we're going to keep it that way. Thank you all.
However, Kissinger warned at the forum on Thursday that the trade war could potentially lead to armed conflict if it goes unresolved. If the two sides keep seeing every issue in the world in terms of conflict with each other, it could be dangerous for mankind, he said. Meanwhile, Paulson warned that the two countries were heading in the wrong direction. The former Treasury Secretary warned of growing barriers on visas and the movement of people, restrictions on trade and technology, and that the ongoing economic tensions would, quote, leave our countries and the entire world worse off. Going now to the topic of Brexit, Britain's main opposition Labour Party unveiled its general election manifesto, promising a radical agenda for social change, including nationalising key industries and a controversial second referendum on Brexit. Take a look.
This manifesto is, and I'm proud of it, the most radical and ambitious plan to transform our country for decades. In an election offering a once-in-a-generation chance for real change. We can end privatisation and rescue our National Health Service. We can get Brexit sorted and bring our country together. I want to bring our divided country together so that we can get on with the real task of delivering the real change that Britain needs. You all know that in your own communities and societies. To drive that change, we will unleash a record investment blitz, getting the economy moving in every corner of our country. When Labour wins, the nurse wins, the student wins, the pensioner wins, the tenant wins, the young couple wins. We all win.
Meanwhile, Britain's Liberal Democrats launched their election manifesto, pledging to scrap Brexit and spend a so-called £50 billion Remain bonus on public services and narrowing inequality. Take a look.
There is no form of Brexit that will be good for the future of our country. It would put our jobs at risk, hurt our NHS, reduce our environmental protections, threaten workers' rights, and it would make us less safe. Whether Brexit is done by Boris Johnson or sorted by Jeremy Corbyn, they are both gambling with your future. At this election, the future of our country is at stake. Don't let anyone tell you that it doesn't get better than Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn.
The first ever global trends for adolescent insufficient physical activity show that urgent action is needed to increase physical activity levels in girls and boys aged 11 to 17 years. Take a look.
Globally, 81% of adolescents aged 11 to 17 do not meet the WHO recommendations on physical activity, and that is to do 1 hour of activity each day or more, and that could be any type of physical activity. It could be walking or riding a bike to school, could be active play, could be physical education class, could be anything. So our finding shows really that 4 out of 5 adolescents do not meet these guidelines and therefore do not get a health benefit from physical activity.
The study, published in the Lancet Child and Adolescent Health Journal and produced by researchers from the World Health Organization, finds that more than 80% of school-going adolescents globally didn't meet current recommendations of at least 1 hour of physical activity per day, including 85% of girls and 78% of boys.
Despite WHO member states signing up for a target to reduce insufficient activity by 15% by 2030, we have not seen major improvements globally in reduction of insufficient physical activity. In fact, in boys we see a tiny improvement. The prevalence went from about 80% in 2001 to about 78% in 2016. So it's still very high and the improvement is small, but we do not see any improvement in girls, where the prevalence of insufficient activity stayed at around 85%, not meeting the WHO recommendations for physical activity.
The study, which is based on data reported by 1.6 million 11 to 17-year-old students, finds that across all 146 countries studied between 2001 to 2016, girls were less active than boys in all but 4: Tonga, Samoa, Afghanistan, and Zambia. The difference in the proportion of boys and girls meeting the recommendations was greater than 10 percentage points in almost 1 in 3 countries in 2016, with the biggest gap seen in the U.S. and Ireland than 15 percentage points, more than 15 percentage points. And most countries in the study, 73%, 107 of 146, saw this gender gap widen between 2001 and to 2016.
Whatever is done in countries to increase physical activity levels really only reaches boys, because we do see some small improvements in physical activity levels in boys, but no improvements in girls. So we really think that girls should be more involved in developing solutions. They should be consulted to help define what types of activities should be offered in communities, at schools, that talk to them, that they find attractive to increase their physical activity participation.
The authors say that levels of insufficient physical activity in adolescents continue to be extremely high, compromising their current and future health. The health benefits of a physical active lifestyle during adolescence include improved cardiorespiratory and muscular fitness, bone and cardiometabolic health, and positive effects on weight. There's also growing evidence that physical activity has a positive impact on cognitive development and socializing. Current evidence suggests that many of these benefits continue into adulthood.
One of the driving factors is an increase in digital technology that's accessible to young people, so more screen time, using their devices more rather than active play. Security also seems to be a bit of an issue, that young people maybe don't feel safe enough to be outside running or walking in parks, places where we'd like them to be more active. That urban design hasn't really encouraged walking and cycling, and that road traffic congestion is also forcing young people off the street. And then finally, in this age group, one of the concerns we have is the amount of time young people are required to devote to academic study, homework, sitting at school, and so less time for active play and activities with their friends. The WHO has been really working to promote activity in this area and produced a very nice guide on the strategies and policies to be active. For this age group, I think the solutions are about promoting activities that appeal to young people, engaging them in determining what kind of activities they'd like to be doing, improving urban design to encourage the urban spaces that are needed for young people to be active, improving the security and safety so that young people can be outside. And then in schools, of course, for this age group, a lot could be done to promote physical activity in schools, physical education, or just opportunities throughout the school day for young people to try and get this 60 minutes of activity that's needed.
All right, let's go on a journey through Hollywood-style sets and get to know Charlie Chaplin's story in this museum dedicated to one of the most impressive artists in the world. Take a look.
Charlie Chaplin is an icon in the silent film industry, a great actor and director.
I shall always remember the top room at 3 Pound Hall Terrace, where I lived as a boy.
Acting skills delighted the spectators and are known by many. With his famous mustache, bowler hat, and bamboo cane, he made wonders with his looks, expressions, and funny walk. Charles Spencer Chaplin was born in Walworth, London, England, on April 16, 1889. He was married 4 times and had 11 children. Some of his popular works include The Little Trump, The Kid, Modern Times, and The Great Dictator. After his career in the United States, he moved to Vevey, a town along Switzerland's Lake Léman, where he passed away at the age of 88. For his contribution to the world of black and white cinema, Chaplin's World opened to the public in Vevey, a museum where we get to discover his life and go back in time through his greatest works and films. Chaplin's World consists of a walk through his private life in the manoir. A studio to travel through the world of silent films, a park in a beautiful setting, and a restaurant. It is open daily. Come and visit Chaplin's World for a trip back to the earlier years of black and white filming. Till next time, I'm Chodelyn Baisa from Switzerland, and I am one with 25.
Going now to Hawaii, here's a rotating restaurant known for its 360-degree island views. Take a look. Thank you, Alfred Asenas and our EBC Hawaii Bureau for that feature. And that's the news for tonight. Join us online and here again tomorrow evening. From all of us here at Eagle News, I'm Alma Angeles, always one with 25. Good night.